Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about structure, function, and performance. This is important to be able to understand how these three terms are used specifically, uh, especially as we start talking about human performance, because often what we need to do to understand human performance is we need to know what structures are involved, what structures are important to train, what functions are involved with a particular movement, how to train those functions, and how both the structures and the functions ultimately are related to performance. So to set that stage, we'll just go through these three terms in this presentation. All right, so let's do some terminology: structure, function, and performance. Structure is the arrangement of the parts of the whole. All right, all the parts that make something up. Function is the normal characteristic or action of the object. And performance is functional effectiveness. It's how well functions are able to be done. All right, those are easy to remember, but let's go through a couple of examples. Let's look at the calculator. What's the structure involved with a calculator? Well, you have this outer casing, you've got buttons on here, you've got wires inside, you've got switches, there's a battery in here, you've got a display. These are just all the parts that make up a calculator. All the parts. Now I'm only listing a few of them here. What are the functions of the calculator? Well, to use it the way that it's designed to be used, we have addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Then there's other functions like a percent sign, square root, and some calculators have a lot of different functions. Those are functions of the calculator to do those things. And then what's the performance of the calculator? How do we quantify that? Well, it's how quickly calculations are made, how accurately they're made, how many decimal places are illustrated in the display, things like that. It's how well the functions are done. Okay, so this is always easy to think of a calculator, and sometimes to improve a calculator, maybe we want to have some different structures. Maybe instead of plastic, we use a metal, or maybe some other type of material to make up the casing, or the buttons. You know, what type of material those made out of, or should the buttons be spring-loaded or pressured in some way? Those are structures that ultimately we may want to address in designing a calculator. Same thing with functions. How many functions do we want to build into a calculator? You know, this calculator is rather simple. Other calculators have all sorts of functions. And you know, that may be important in designing a particular calculator. And then the performance, obviously we're interested in how quickly the calculator adds. Most calculators happen pretty quickly, but maybe there's a reason to have an even faster calculation if we're trying to use some automated system. You know, now we're getting to self-driving cars. That performance of calculations needs to happen really quickly in order for that car to be safe. All right, so that's structure, function, and performance of an object. Well, let's move that a little closer to the human body. Let's look at the running shoe. What are the structures involved with the running shoe? Well, this is actually an interesting question, because we have to define what a shoe is. And maybe a shoe is nothing more than some type of covering of the sole of the foot and some type of attachment to the foot, some type of strap. So sandal would almost be considered a shoe. Our running shoes are typically, if we think of a running shoe, we think of all these different structures involved in building a shoe. We have the midsole, we have the outer sole, we have laces, inner sole, the tongue, the heel counter, some of the material in the toe box. These are all parts of the shoe. They're not all necessary, but they do make up a shoe. And so if we take any particular shoe, we could sit down, break it down to all the different parts that make up that shoe. And it would be different based on which model of shoe or what type of shoe we're looking at. Okay, so that's the structure of the shoe. What are the functions of the shoe? Well, it's, you know, primary functions are to protect the foot from the ground, you know, maybe from abrasions or maybe from rocks. or maybe it's protection from impact. Maybe the shoe is functioning to allow a certain amount of movement, to account for people who pronate or supinate, or some type of movement even in the sagittal plane, or some type of movement at the metatarsals. These are the shoe is designed to allow certain functions. And again, we have primary functions like the ones I'm talking about now. And then we have secondary functions of shoe. I guess it could be a weapon. You could throw it at somebody, or you could use it as a hammer and nail something. Those are secondary functions of the shoe that sometimes you can get quite creative in coming up with secondary functions. And then what's the performance of the shoe? Well, it's how much or how well impact energy is absorbed, how much motion control the shoe allows. And we can often measure those during running and other things as well. And maybe it's performance related to how fast a person is allowed to run, or how a running economy may be influenced by a shoe, things such as that. So performance is how well a shoe functions. The functions are what the shoe is built to do, and the structures are all the different parts of a shoe. All right, so again, it's sort of a mechanical example there. I guess we have one more, which is really what we're going to do in chapter 1 of Physiology of Endurance Performance, is muscle structure, muscle function, and muscle performance. That's the way that chapter is laid out. So when you read that chapter in Tim Noakes' Lore of Running, realize that what you're reading is material describing the structure of muscle, the function of muscle, and then the performance of muscle. Ultimately, we want to take all of this information to understand human performance. But in order to understand human performance, we need to know how muscles are built, the ligaments, the tendons, the connective tissue, how the sliding filament, the parts of the sliding filament and the sarcomere that are important to know about. We need to know muscle function, how muscle contracts, how muscle generates heat, how muscle may aid in blood flow and circulation. And then ultimately we can understand muscle performance, how well the muscle contracts, how quickly contraction occurs, how much energy the muscle uses to allow for contraction. Okay, thank you.